Hi, Connect Groups, and happy Thursday. We're entering into a new season. It's fall, and we had our sign-ups, record-breaking activity, 96 people signing up at the table event, and you're part of that. So thank you very much. This is the lifeblood of our ministry to one another as adults. Connect Groups are rooted in the practice of Christians since the beginning. And as a reference point, your leaders have been encouraged to always anchor into Acts chapter 2, in which the apostles' teaching, breaking of bread, fellowship, and prayers are the four elements that comprise a great gathering of a Connect group. And so this portion, watching the video and thinking through the praying upon the sermon from last week is in response to one of those four, and it's that of the apostles' teaching. Not my teaching, as it were, I was an apostle, but the apostolic teaching that was given to us and entrusted to us, passing on to us through the Word of God. So we're diving now into our Sunday sermon from last week, and we covered Saul and his conversion experience. And we'll begin with diving into the first theme that we emphasized together last week, which was from Acts chapter 26 in verse 14, in which Jesus talks to Paul, and he says these words, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads." That's Acts 26 in verse 14. And the emphasis was on this goading, this response of pressure and pushing and prodding. With the ancient world, this agricultural implement was used to poke and to prod. I grew up a little bit around farming. My grandparents had a farm, and I've seen my uncle or grandfather take a pitchfork and push it right into a steer. That's goading. He's using that prick to just move this animal along. And I've also sensed in my spiritual life times when God, namely here Jesus, is pushing me and prodding me. Actually, in the United States, we wouldn't use the word goading as much as in the kind of Western cattle culture, you'd call it a cattle prod. So we're just prodding forward here. And so the question is, how does that make you feel when you know that it's actually God who's prodding you? In this case, it's not meant for evil, but it's meant for the ultimate good. But it feels uncomfortable, and Saul is kicking against it, which kind of helps us understand that maybe there was a lot more going on before this encounter on the road to Damascus. And Paul was resisting and kicking and fighting. And so one area that you can, and maybe it's somewhat humorous now that you look back on your Christian life, or maybe it's still tender and raw, but share one with another a time when you felt, upon reflection, it really was God pushing me forward, even though I was resisting. Share with one another that story, that brief account. Maybe share how that felt at the time, and now how you value that prodding in hindsight. And then secondly, I want to give you an opportunity to explore a part of this discussion between Jesus and Saul that we didn't cover last Sunday. And I'll take this from the conversion account in Acts chapter 9. In Acts chapter 9 in verse 5, and he said, "Who are you, Lord?" And he said, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." There's something very interesting going on here in the language that Jesus uses. Saul's knocked off his horse. He's blinded. The glory of Jesus is so bright. He asks, "Who are you?" in response to the phrase, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And Jesus answers, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." Now this is the resurrected Jesus. He's coming in speaking to Paul in his spiritual state, if you will, so that Paul's not physically persecuting Jesus up to this point. He'd been persecuting who? Well, the church. In Acts chapter 8, it says that Saul approved the execution of Stephen. In Acts chapter 9, verse 1, it says, Saul was breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord. And yet Jesus says, I am Jesus, and it's me that you're actually persecuting. So there's a connection between the church and Jesus. A great Bible teacher from the UK named Dick Lucas expounded on this and kind of put it in this simple phrase. What we do to the church, we do to Christ. What we do to the church, we do to Christ. So theologically, Christ is at the head. He's the leader, but we're connected as the body to this head. So what we're doing to the church, we're actually doing to Jesus as the head. And I guess the second question that you could ponder and dive into would be, well, based on Acts 9:5 and this reality that what we do to the church, we actually do to Christ, what does that then say about our relationships in the church and how we treat one another? How does this impact those relationships? And how might our actions and behaviors and thoughts and feelings need to be adjusted when we think of this other person in view of their connectivity to Christ? So as you ponder, as you discuss, as you open up and share, then take those prayer points where we could say, Lord, sharpen me in this area. Lord, thank you for goading me on. Lord, help me value and cherish those who are in your church, knowing that it's actually you. And then pray one for another. I know you'll have a great time fellowshipping. I know you have a great time around the food table. And I pray that this Bible discussion has equal value and that your prayers are sincere and filled with faith. I know God's Spirit will show up when we gather in His name. Thank you for doing that. Welcome to your Connect group. Have a great semester. God bless.